Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got an unusual Glock, the Glock 38, chambered in 45 gap. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis Axe and Core belts. You'll find a link that you can sign up for Big Daddy Unlimited. They actually have things in stock and usually at a lower price than other places. Link to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links. It will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. Thank you. This gun is chambered in, actually before I pick this up, I'm going to do an ammo comparison and then get rid of the ammo. But this is chambered in 45 gap, which is this round right here. This is a Speer Lawnman, and it's a 200 grain. And this is a typical 230 grain, if I can get them lined up right, a typical 230 grain 45 ACP. So 45 ACP over here, 45 gap here. You can see how much shorter it is. It's still 45 caliber, and the whole purpose behind this caliber was to get roughly the same power that a 45 ACP has in something that would fit into more of a Glock 19 style gun. So let me get rid of this ammo, put it in my pocket so it's away from the table, and then I'm going to pick up this gun and talk about it. And of course the gun is clear and the ammo is in my pocket, so it's out of the way. Now 45 gap stands for Glock Auto Pistol. It was actually produced by Glock. The idea was thought up by Glock, and the concept was to get what is basically a Glock 19-ish style gun, or a compact, in 45 ACP without losing any power. The other thing that it does is it makes the grip a little bit smaller, so if you've got smaller hands, and it allows for that smaller form factor. The people that like 45 ACP like it for the perceived stopping power. This is still a 45 caliber bullet, it just goes a little faster. So for example, your typical Federal 230 grain 45 ACP is going 835 feet per second, and it's about 358 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. The Speer Lawman that I've showed in this example here, and there are different versions of it, it's going about 920 and results in about 326 foot-pounds. So it does lose a little bit, but not a lot considering the significant reduction in size. Never took off. It's one of those calibers that was more of a solution looking for a problem, and it never took off. But I've kind of been interested in it. I find some of these oddball calibers to be interesting, see what they shoot like, see how the guns that chamber them work. So I stumbled across this. The interesting thing I find about these calibers, the calibers that are less popular, is when you get into some kind of a crisis where people buy up guns, there's kind of a life cycle. You get wide variety of everything, including things like this. And this, by the way, is a Gen 3. This never got the Gen 4 treatment from Glock, and I don't expect this ever to appear in a Gen 5. It's just not popular enough. But, you know, things are normal, everything's out there, and then all the mainstream calibers disappear when something starts. Next thing you know, all you find are these calibers, because this is the last thing people are going to buy. They want 9, 40, 45. Then these are gone, and at that point, you're in the middle of the crisis. Then the regular calibers start to reappear because the manufacturers use all of their capacity to make 9, 40, 45, the popular stuff. When these start to reappear, that's kind of a sign things are on the mend. So I'm seeing oddball calibers like this starting to reappear. 357 SIG, which enjoyed significant popularity at one point, but is kind of fading now. These are starting to be available again. So that's possibly a good sign that the general availability is recovering. But let's talk about this gun. As I mentioned, it's a Glock 19-ish size gun. So from a length perspective, it's 7.36 inches front to back, which is the same as a Glock 19. It's 5.04 inches tall with the flush 45 gap magazine. It's kind of tall and skinny-ish looking. So it's 5.04 inches tall, which is the same as a Glock 19. It is thicker a little bit, because 45 is thicker than even the largest of the Glock 19 size guns. So it comes in at 1.30 instead of 1.26. This holds 8 rounds because you really can't defeat the laws of physics in that you still got roughly half-inch round things that you got to stack in here. So it is a double stack, but it kind of offsets the stacking a little bit, and you only get 8 rounds. There is a magazine available that'll get you 10 rounds. I don't happen to have one. But the larger Glock 20 and some of the other in that line will hold a few more, but they're bigger. So what you've got now is something that is small and concealable, but has roughly the same power that 45 ACP does. One other thing that's a little different is front to back, the grip is a little bit narrower, so there's a little bit less distance. So the trigger pull on this is 2.80 inches from when I'm grabbing hold of it here instead of 2.85. So that's a lot of numbers, but basically this gun really is about the numbers. The whole reason the 45 gap came into existence was to make a smaller gun with that power. And by the way, a minute ago I said Glock 20. Of course, my mind goes to my favorite caliber, which is 10 millimeter. It's really the Glock 21 is the next size up from this in 45 ACP. In 45 ACP, they've got a subcompact, which is the 30, and then they've got a standard, which is what they call it, or full size, which many other manufacturers would call it, which is the 21, and then they got some larger variants. So now you've got the ability to have 45 in a smaller package. The problem that you ran into is the ammo never really became readily available. The people that want 45, it's 45 ACP, period. That's what they want. And others graduated towards 9mm, 40, and 10mm, so never really enjoyed any popularity. I'm actually kind of surprised and happy they're still making it. Fundamentally, it's a Glock, so it's got the Glock U-dot sights. I don't know if night sights versions were ever available, but it takes the same sights that any other Glock does, so there's a whole wide array of market available sights if you want to change them out. It does have the standard single slot Glock type rail. It's got the serrations on the front of the trigger. Because this is a Gen 3, it does not have replaceable back straps, but it does have the internal drop safety and the toggle on the trigger that all Glocks have. So it's got all the safety features and all the functional features of any other Glock. And it has this kind of a pebblish texture on the sides, and then little squares on the front, and notice there are finger grooves, and little squares on the back, and some stripes up at the top. I found it easy to hold on to. I've got strong hands. I didn't have any problem holding on to this thing, firing it, holding it, doing whatever. But this kind of pebbly finish really doesn't offer a whole lot of grip. So there were problems with people complaining on the Gen 3s and the Gen 2s before that they were slippery. They were, especially when wet, they were hard to keep a hold of. I really didn't find that to be an issue with this. But of course Gen 4 came out with the more aggressive texture and completely solved that along with the replaceable back straps. So Gen 3, I don't think, as I mentioned earlier, I'll ever see a Gen 5. And of course at this point, if they haven't made a Gen 4 of something, they're not going to. They've moved on from the Gen 4. And interestingly enough, on their site, I'm seeing a lot of the Gen 4s becoming law enforcement only and pushing towards the Gen 5. So the mainstream commercial production of Gen 4s is kind of slowly fading away and driving towards the Gen 5s. On the flip side of it, you don't have a reversible mag catch. This is a Gen 3, and of course no ambi features on the other side, and no front serrations. It is a nice gun. I found it pleasant to shoot. The recoil on this is a little bit snappier than 45. We got a smaller, faster bullet, tends to be a little snappier, but not ridiculous. It doesn't have quite that nice pushback recoil that 45 ACP has, but it was pleasant to shoot. It was easy to stay on target, and it was a nice solid thump. It was a nice gun to shoot. So let's talk about the trigger. Basically, it's a Glock trigger. If you fired one Glock trigger, you fired them all. There's minimal take-up, kind of a very defined wall, about a 5.5 pound break, nice crisp wall, relatively short break. There's the reset, and you're right on the wall. There's no take-up, and then break again. So it has I like Glock triggers. So for me, I like that defined wall. I like that short reset. So for me, shooting this was easy to just get right in the swing of it from shooting other Glocks. Other features of it are basically the same, such as the takedown. So I've got the trigger pulled. So I'm going to kind of give it a little squeeze and take it apart. And first thing you're going to notice right away is a recoil spring. Most of the Glocks you see these days have dual recoil spring, starting in Gen 4 and some Gen 3s, but definitely in Gen 4 and up, they all have dual recoil springs. This is a captive spring, but it's a single wafer style spring. The barrel on this, it is a Glock barrel, so it has polygonal rifling. It's well manufactured. Let me get my little light here, show you the barrel and the rifling. It's well machined and smooth, which is typical of Glock. get this turned the right way that I light it up. You see that the polygonal rifling as opposed to land and groove. And it has a nice kind of a semi-polished, machine-polished feed ramp. Had no problems with this feeding. Other than that, the features of it are very much what you're used to seeing. On the frame, it's pretty much a standard Glock frame. So you got your standard Glock style rear guides and front guides. So internally, when you look at a Gen 4 versus a Gen 3 frame, just looking at the frame like this, there's almost no perceivable difference that you can tell. Differences are really in the grip and some of the other features, but when you look at it here, they all look about the same. And on the slide, well machined, there's your drop safety, so you do retain the drop safeties. And all the other characteristics are pretty much the same as Glock. Go ahead and put that back together. Snap the recoil spring in, make sure it lines up. And you're back in business. Now, one thing I did notice about this gun, and it was more pronounced before I cleaned it for the first time, and then it got less pronounced when I actually fired it. But what I found with this is, as I close it, if I close it slowly, there's a little bit of hesitation closing. All Glocks have that to some extent, but not as noticeable as this. Before I cleaned it and fired it for the first time, I could actually let go and it would stop right about there. Then when I cleaned it and oiled it, it would only occasionally do that. And then after having it to the range and back, now it's like this. A lot of times when you see that, that will indicate that you'll have a problem with weak ammo, or that it'll be a little bit sensitive. It wasn't. It worked properly from round one to time we were done with it. So as far as I'm concerned, that's not an issue. That may be more of a characteristic of the way a single recoil spring versus the dual recoil springs work, but I wouldn't consider it a problem. I was a little bit concerned about it when I first took it out of the box because it would actually stop kind of right about there and just sit there. And you poke it and it would close. That went away after I took it apart, cleaned it, and oiled it, but you still had that little hitch. Other than that, I've had no problems with this, and where it counts, live fire on the range, that did not manifest as a problem. One other nuancey difference is you see the slide stop slide release is a little different on the Gen 3s. It's got this little bit of a shelf to catch on your hand. I kind of actually like that. I've got a Gen 4 here. This is a Glock 29. You see they kind of went to a flat one. And that's to make it a little more flush, a little more streamlined, a little less likely to snag. But this is actually easy to get your thumb on. It's a nice pronounced shelf, but it's all rounded and smooth, so I don't really see that snagging on anything. Just a difference. Overall, I found this pleasant to shoot. I found it easy to shoot well, and I liked the way the cartridge recoiled. The little bit extra snappiness wasn't enough to make it unpleasant, and it overall was nice. Now the question is, would I recommend you go look for one of these and buy one? If you're looking for interesting cartridges, if you're into collecting, you're into range days, interesting things, yeah, go ahead and get one. If you're looking for a self-defense weapon, the caliber itself, I think, is perfectly capable of self-defense. It's a competent cartridge for that. But you're going to have a hard time finding ammo. There's no guarantee that they're going to continue production so that the ammo will continue to be available. This would probably not be my first choice for anything that I mean to use seriously. This is more of a fun gun. Ammo, by the way, is more expensive because it's harder to get a hold of. I paid $60 for 50 rounds of it, and most 9mm and all those are even 45 ACP is significantly less than that these days. It's because it's hard to find. So for collectors, fun, range, unique, I got one, you don't kind of thing, yeah, they're a good gun. Serious home defense, concealed carry, functionally it'll work, but I wouldn't choose it. You're going to have a hard time feeding and maintaining the thing. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell to be notified if you do. Check us out on Facebook, Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, kind of everywhere. And thank you.